Hey, good afternoon, Meredith students. It's Miss Overton coming at you with the next chapter of the BFG Chapter 7 titled The Marvelous Ears. And I hope that you are having a great virtual spirit day. Today is mismatch day, so feel free to wear your best mismatched attire. I hope you've had a great week so far of learning and doing new things. The Marvelous Ears. Back in the cave, the big, friendly giant sat Sophie down once again on the enormous table. "Is you quite snugly in there in your nightie?" he asked. "You isn't fridgy cold?" "I'm fine," Sophie said. "I can't help thinking," said the BFG, "about your poor mother and father. By now they must be jipping and skipping all over the house shouting, 'Hello! Hello! Where is Sophie gone?'" "I don't have a mother and father," Sophie said. "They both died when I was a baby." "Oh, you poor little scrumplet," cried the BFG. "Is you not missing them very badly?" "Not really," Sophie said, "because I never knew them." "You is making me very sad," the BFG said, rubbing his eyes. "Don't be sad," Sophie said. "No one is going to be worrying too much about me. That place you took me from was the village orphanage. We are all orphans in there." "You is an orphan?" "Yes." "How many are there in there?" "10 of us," Sophie said, "all little girls." "Was you happy there?" the BFG said. "I hated it," Sophie said. "The woman who ran it was called Miss Clonkers, and if she caught you breaking any of the rules, like getting out of bed at night or not folding up your clothes, you got punished. She locked us in the dark cellar for a day and a night without any food to eat or drink." "That rotten old rot-strapper!" cried the BFG. "It was horrid," Sophie said. "We used to dread it. There were rats down there. We could hear them creeping about." "That filthy old fizzwiggler!" shouted the BFG. "That is the horridest thing I've ever heard in years. You is making me sadder than ever." All at once, a huge tear that would have filled a bucket rolled down the BFG's cheeks and fell with a splash on the floor. It made quite a puddle. Sophie watched with astonishment. "What a strange and moody creature this is," she thought. "One moment he's telling me my head is full of squashed flies, and the next moment his heart is melting for me because Mrs. Clonkers locks us in the cellar." "The thing that worries me," Sophie said, "is having to stay in this dreadful place for the rest of my life. The orphanage was pretty awful, but I wouldn't have been there forever, would I?" "All is my fault," the BFG said. "I is the one who kid-snatched you." Yet another enormous tear welled from his eye and splashed to the floor. "Now I come to think of it, I won't actually be here all that long," Sophie said. "I is afraid you will," the BFG said. "No, I won't," Sophie said. "Those brutes out there are bound to catch me sooner or later and have me for tea." "I is never letting that happen," the BFG said. For a few moments, the cave was silent. Then Sophie said, "May I ask you a question?" The BFG wiped the tears from his eyes with the back of his hand and gave Sophie a long, thoughtful stare. "Shoot away," he said. "Would you please tell me what you were doing in our village last night? Why were you poking that long trumpet thing into the Gucci children's bedroom and blowing through it?" "Aha!" cried the BFG, sitting up suddenly in his chair. "Now we is getting noisier than a Parker." "And that suitcase you were carrying," Sophie said. "What on earth was that all about?" The BFG stared suspiciously at the small girl sitting cross-legged on the table. "You was asking me to tell you wopsy big secrets," he said. "Secrets that nobody is ever hearing before." "I won't tell a soul," Sophie said. "I swear it. How could I anyway? I'm stuck here for the rest of my life. You could be telling the other giants," he said. "No, I couldn't," Sophie said. "You told me that they would eat me up the moment they saw me." "And so they would," said the BFG. "You is a human being, and human beings is like straw bunkles and cream to the giants." "If they is going to eat me the moment they see me, then I wouldn't have time to tell them anything, would I?" Sophie said. "You wouldn't," said the BFG. "Then why did you say that I might?" "Because I am brimful of buzzburgers," the BFG said. "If you listen to everything I'm saying, you'll be getting an earache. Please tell me what you were doing in our village, Sophie said. I promise you can trust me. Would you teach me how to make an elephant? The BFG asked. What do you mean? Sophie said. I would dearly love to have an elephant to ride on, the BFG said dreamily. I would so much love to have a jumbo, a big elephant, to go riding through the green forests, picking peachy fruits off the trees all day long. This is a sizzly hot, muck-frumping country we live in. Nothing grows in it except snozcumbers. I would love to go somewhere else and pick peachy fruits in the early morning from the back of an elephant. Sophie was quite moved by this curious statement. Perhaps one day we'll go get you an elephant, she said, and peachy fruits as well. Now tell me what you're doing in our village. If you really is wanting to know what I'm doing in your village, the BFG said, I is blowing a dream into the bedroom of those children. Blowing a dream, Sophie said. What do you mean? I is a dream-blowing giant, the BFG said. When all the other giants is galloping off every night what way and that to swallow up human beings, I is scuttling away to other places to blow dreams into the bedrooms of sleeping children. Nice dreams, lovely golden dreams, dreams that is giving the dreamers a happy time. Now hang on a minute, Sophie said. Where do you get all those dreams? I collect them, the BFG said, waving his arm toward all the rows and rows of bottles on the shelf. I has billions of them. You can't collect a dream, Sophie said. A dream isn't something you can catch hold of. You was never going to understand about it, the BFG said. That is why I was not wishing to tell you. Oh, please tell me, Sophie said. I will understand. Go on. Tell me how you collect the dreams. Tell me everything. The BFG settled himself comfortably in his chair and crossed his legs. Dreams, he said, is very mysterious things. They is floating around the air like wispy, misty bubbles, and all the time they is searching for sleeping people. Can you see them? Sophie asked. Never at first. Then how do you catch them if you can't see them? Sophie asked. Aha, said the BFG. Now we're getting on to the dark and dusky secrets. I won't tell a soul. I is trusting you, the BFG said. He closed his eyes and sat quite still for a moment while Sophie waited. A dream, he said, as it goes whiffling through the night air, is making a tiny little buzzing humming noise. But this little buzzy hum is so silvery soft, it is impossible for a human being to be hearing it. The BFG pointed up at his enormous truck wheel ears, which has now begun to move in and out. He performed this exercise proudly with a little proud smile on his face. Is you seeing these? He asked. How could I miss them? Sophie said. They may be as looking a bit preposterous to you, the BFG said, but you mustn't believe me when I say they are very extra usual ears indeed. They is not to be coughed at. I'm quite sure they are not, Sophie said. They is allowing me to hear absolutely every single twiddly little thing. You mean you can hear things I can't hear? Sophie said. You is as deaf as a dumpling compared with me, cried the BFG. You is hearing only thumping loud noises with those little earwigs of yours, but I'm hearing all the secret whisperings of the world. Such as what? Sophie asked. Check out this great illustration of the BFG's enormous ears. In your community, he said, I is hearing the footsteps of a ladybird as she goes walking across a leaf. Honestly, Sophie said, beginning to be impressed. What's more, I is hearing those footsteps very loud, the BFG said. When a ladybird is walking across a leaf, I is hearing the feet going clumpity clump clump, like giant's footsteps. Good gracious me, Sophie said. What else can you hear? I is hearing the little ants chittering to each other as they scuttle around the soil. You mean you can hear ants talking? Every single word, the BFG said, although I is not exactly understanding their language. Go on, Sophie said. Sometimes, on a very clear night, the BFG said, and if I is swigging my ears in the right direction, and here he swiveled his great ears upwards so that they were facing the ceiling. If I is swiggling them like this, and the night is very clear, I can sometimes hear faraway music coming from the stars in the sky. A queer little shiver passed through Sophie's body. She sat very quiet, waiting for more. My ears is what told me you were watching me out of your window last night, the BFG said. But I didn't make a sound, Sophie said. I was hearing your heart beating across the road, the BFG said, loud as a drum. Go on, Sophie said, please. I can hear plants and trees. Do they talk? Sophie asked. They is not exactly talking, the BFG said, but they is making noise. For instance, if I come along and I pick a lovely flower, if I is twisting the stem out of the flower until it breaks, then the plant is screaming. I can hear it screaming, and it's screaming very clear. You don't mean it, Sophie cried. How awful! It is screaming just like you would be screaming if somebody was twisting your arm right off. Is that really true? Sophie asked. You think I is swizfiggling you. It is rather hard to believe, Sophie said. Then I is stopping right here, said the BFG sharply. I is not wishing to be called a fibster. Oh, no, I'm not calling you anything, Sophie cried. I believe you. I really do. Please go on. The BFG gave her a long, hard stare. Sophie looked right back at him, her face open to his. I believe you, she said softly. She had offended him. She could see that. I wouldn't ever be fibbing to you, he said. I know you wouldn't, Sophie said, but you must understand that it isn't easy to believe such amazing things straight away. I understand that, the BFG said, so do please forgive me and go on, she said. He waited a while longer, and then he said, it's the same with trees as it is with flowers. If I is chopping an axe into the trunk of a big tree, I is hearing a terrible sound coming from inside the heart of the tree. What sort of sound? Sophie said. A soft moaning sound, the BFG said. It's like the sound an old man is making when he is dying slowly. He paused. The cave was very silent. Trees is living and growing just like you and me, he said. They is alive. So is plants. He was sitting very straight forward in his chair now, his hands clasped together in front of him. His face was bright, his eyes round and bright as two stars. Such wonderful and terrible sounds I is hearing, he said. Some of them you would never wish to be hearing yourself, but some is like glorious magic. He seemed almost to be transfigured by the excitement of his thoughts. His face was beautiful in its blaze of emotions. Tell me some more about them, Sophie said quietly. You just ought to be hearing the little mices talking, he said. Little mices is always talking to each other, and I is hearing them as loud as my own voice. What do they say? Sophie asked. Only the mices know that, he said. Spiders is also talking a great deal. You might not be thinking it, but spiders is the most tremendous chatterboxes. And when they is spinning their webs, they is singing all the time. They sing sweeter than the night gull. Who else do you hear? Sophie asked. One of the biggest chatterbags is the caterpillars, the BFG said. What do they say? They is arguing all the time about who is going to be the prettiest butterfly. That is all they ever talk about. Is there a dream floating around here now? Sophie asked. The BFG moved his great ears this way and that, listening intently. He shook his head. There is no dream in here, he said, except in the bottles. I has a special place to go for catching dreams. They is not often coming to giant country. How do you catch them? The same way you is catching butterflies, the BFG answered, with a net. He stood up and crossed over a corner of the cave where a pole was leaning across the wall. The pole was about 30 feet long, and there was a net at the end of it. Here is the dream catcher, he said, grasping the pole in one hand. Every morning I is going out and snitching new dreams to put in my bottles. Suddenly, he seemed to lose interest in the conversation. I is getting very hungry, he said. It's time for eats. And that is the end of the chapter, The Marvelous Ears. So we will be coming back at you tomorrow with the next chapter, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, Meredith.